Would a nationwide lockdown and mandatory martial law stop this outbreak? And what would the consequences be for our stock market? Would we be better off just shutting down our stock market, our real estate market, hunkering down for an extended spring break, and letting all of this blow over? Let's now consider the case for martial law. This is a graphic from the New York Times. Like 'em or not, it shows how quickly the current outbreak spreads. And today, March 28th, 2020, President Trump on Twitter just stated, "I'm giving consideration to a quarantine of developing hotspots in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut." This begs the question, should we put our country on a 30-day martial law style lockdown, or even a partial lockdown, to abate this crisis? My name is Kevin, and in this video, we're going to explore that idea. 10 days ago, billionaire and activist investor Bill Ackman tweeted, "Mr. President, the only answer is to shut down the country for the next 30 days and close the borders. Tell all Americans that you're putting us on an extended spring break at home with family. Keep only essential services open. The government pays wages until we reopen." This at the same time as Donald Trump has a goal to reopen the country and our economy by Easter, which if you're like me and didn't know what date Easter was, it's apparently Sunday, April 12th. Now, left, right, or center, I think at this point there's no denying that we're facing a very real outbreak. There are currently over 650,000 cases worldwide. We will soon hit the 1 million case mark, which is terrible. And of these 650,000 cases that we have now, 30,000 have already died, and 481,000 of them are still infected and battling this outbreak. The unfortunate reality is that deaths around the world are doubling at alarming rates. In Italy, deaths, not cases, double every 4 days. In the United States and France, deaths double every 3 days. Spain and Germany, every 2 days. The UK, every 1.5 to 2 days. Yet China has almost no new cases. And so what is China doing differently? Well, here's Donald McNeil with his analysis.
If you go into any building, your temperature is taken. I came into this building, nobody took my temperature. They asked me some silly questions I could have lied about. But, you get your fever taken. You get into a bus, your temperature is taken. You walk into the train station, your temperature is taken. You walk into the building, you walk back to your apartment building, your temperature is taken.
And what happens if you show a fever?
Then you're sent to a fever clinic. People are not sent to their own doctor's offices. Your doctor's office is dangerous. One of those tests will make you cough, usually cough or gag, and then you've infected the doctor. And then the doctor's office is out, and you've possibly infected everybody else in the waiting room. So they are sent to specific fever clinics. They're met by people in complete protective gear. They get a quick white blood cell count, which takes about half an hour to see whether or not they have bacterial pneumonia. It doesn't tell you what the bacteria is, but it tells you whether or not you've likely got that. They get a quick flu test to see if they have flu. If you've got one of those, maybe you can be excluded and go home. You're something else. But if you don't have either one of those, then you're given a CT scan. CT scans in this country take half an hour to an hour, and they're extremely expensive things. There they have portable CT scanners. They have pushed people through those things at the rate of 200 a day. Once the scan results come back, and if they can't get the scan results back that day, they have to go to a hotel, a quarantine hotel, and wait until the results come back.
Apart from their family.
Apart from their family, and that is the key element. There is no home isolation. There is no home quarantine. 75 to 80% of the transmission in China was in family clusters. What would make the news was things like, oh my God, it's in the prisons. Oh my God, it's in Parliament, or whatever. It wasn't in Parliament there, but you'd hear these kind of, but 75 to 80% of it was inside the family. And they knew they had to stop that if they're going to stop the disease. Crucial thing about that system is break the chains of transmission and also do what you can to keep the hospitals from getting overwhelmed. Because when the hospitals get overwhelmed, you have to say, okay, she lives, but he dies, and he dies, or whatever. She's young and has kids, we'll save her. Grandmother, goodbye.
So this is what China's doing. And compare what California is doing to what China's doing.
People still doing essential work. People still providing essential services. People still going out to the grocery store to get food, walking their dogs, practicing social distancing. Nonetheless, when they're out in the streets, people still getting their medicine. People still going about doing the kind of essential work that is required to meet this moment. The order provides for all of that.
A gubernatorial order, but what does that mean? Is that something that's enforced, Or what's going to motivate people to actually stay indoors in California?
We will have social pressure that will encourage people to do the right thing, just to nod and look, saying, hey, maybe you should reconsider just being out there on the beach, being 22 strong at a park. I don't believe that the people of California need to be told through law enforcement that it's appropriate just to home isolate, protect themselves, go about the essential patterns of life, but do so by socially distancing themselves from others, and do so using their common sense.
And see, this is where we have to ask ourselves, the more we demand liberty, the less safety we can potentially have from this outbreak. But at the same time, the more we're willing to take away liberty and freedom to control and contain the outbreak and take control of this, we are also hurting our entire economy. So we've got this massive, bizarre complexity of rights, the economy, and moral ethics, people's lives. And while we consider martial law, you might consider getting yourself ready to be stuck at home for quite a bit longer by taking advantage of the coupon code down below and joining me in the real estate investing course, the do-it-yourself property management course, a course for sales, and a course on the psychology of money. But that begs the question, is quarantine the answer? Is a mandatory lockdown the answer? And has this ever been talked about before? Or how about, has it ever been done before? Anytime there's an epidemic in a country or a pandemic around the world, one of the first things that professionals think of is limiting trade or travel. A recent example of this came on October 18th, 2019, during a pandemic scenario called Event 201.
We are anticipating far greater disruptions to trade and travel may be on the horizon. One prominent economist estimates that global GDP could fall an additional 4% as a result of travel and trade restrictions. This would cause a severe global recession. Such a severe recession has the potential to result in both high unemployment and runaway inflation, creating the groundwork for national instability and change in the global political landscape.
This was before we had ever heard of that little outbreak that started in China. Now, I just want to be super, super clear. What I'm about to play you is a scenario that was imagined on October 18th, and they demonstrated this potential outbreak. But watch how crazy and similar it is to what's actually happening, what started happening just 2 months later. So I'm gonna hit play now. This is a fictitious example. Compare it to reality.
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread silently within herds. Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care, many died. At first, the spread was limited to those with close contacts, healthcare personnel, co-workers, and families. But now, it's spreading rapidly throughout local communities. International travel has turned local epidemics into a pandemic spanning the globe. Just 3 months ago, CAP started in South America, but has now reached several countries with more than 30,000 cases and nearly 2,000 deaths.
In their scenario, the outbreak ravaged densely populated and poor cities in South America and then spread through the rest of the world. And despite this eerily similar scenario being conducted just 2 months before virtually the same kind of scenario became a reality, the committee had a really hard time debating whether or not they should actually ban trade and travel and forcibly lock down countries.
But unless that is done in a global context, and it's done very early, we will end up with a situation where the entire supply chain will have gone.
On the other hand, you have a communist regime in China that shut this outbreak down, but they shut it down by forcing people to stay inside. Now, we're gonna talk about quarantine, but I encourage you to check out the links in the description down below for all of my sources. So if you wanna learn more about Event 201, you can. You could also go click that link for Webull so that you can take advantage of getting 2 free stocks if you deposit just $100. That is, you deposit $100 on on the stock trading platform Webull, you will get 2 free stocks valued anywhere between $500 to $1,400. And now one of the reasons more and more people are now calling for mandatory shutdowns of cities and fines for going outside is because these are pictures of what happened after voluntary quarantine or essential stay-at-home quarantine was put into effect. People at bars, people having weddings, people at beaches, and people just straight up saying,
"If I get corona, I get corona."
Obviously, after reports like this, many beaches and public places and bars have been forced to close, now leaving more people unemployed, but also more people stuck at home. But is this the right thing to do? Here's an article from the BBC that found that in India, one person who refused to quarantine while they were sick may have led 40,000 people to be forced into quarantine. And that was because this 70-year-old, while sick, refused to self-quarantine and ended up going to a 6-day event where 10,000 people visited the event every single day. This 70-year-old has since passed away, but before he passed away, infected 19 of his own family members. But why should we put everyone on lockdown? Isn't the seasonal flu worse than this? Well, recent reports by The Economist have indicated that this particular outbreak can do something known as aerosolize, meaning that germs from the actual issue can stay afloat in the air for up to 3 hours and can survive on surfaces like plastics and metals for 3 to 4 days. This makes this outbreak particularly dangerous and extremely contagious, but it has a max 14-day incubation period, which basically means it takes 14 days to figure out if you're sick or not. And this is why there are now so many calls for a mandatory 14-day quarantine. If everybody stayed inside for 14 days, we would be able to separate those who are sick from those who are not. That is, the spread could potentially be stopped in its tracks, much like what happened in China. See, and it was knowledge like this that actually led me to go to a grocery store 2 weeks ago wearing essentially a hazmat suit. Now, some of this received some relatively negative attention, and I understand because it comes across as potentially spreading fear. Except I didn't wear this protective gear for fun. I wore this because my wife, the mother of my 2 children, has severe asthma and allergies. And unfortunately, the odds are really high that if she caught this issue, she would be in critical care and she could be at risk of passing away. This isn't even to mention that otherwise healthy, now 30 and 40-year-olds are also passing away from this issue. And that's also not to mention the collateral damage. What if it now takes 50 minutes for a hospital's ambulance to get to you if you're having a heart attack, whereas otherwise it may have only taken 8 minutes to get an ambulance to your house? Well, this would mean that most of your golden hour, that hour where you have the highest chance of survival, would be gone. But what if everybody who thinks they're sick just goes and gets tested? I hear they have drive-by clinics now. Well, here's what one of those looks like in New Jersey, where you have over 150 cars in line just to get drive-by tested. It is now so difficult to actually get tested that Apple has created a website to help you determine if you should even bother getting tested, if you're actually at a severe risk and you actually need to get tested, which means the underreporting of what's happening could be severely high. The actual amount of cases that exist could be substantially higher than what we actually think the outbreak is causing. But what would a quarantine accomplish? Well, this is where we can look back to Bill Ackman's Twitter, and we can see this convenient infographic that shows if we have no social distancing, one sick person can get over 400 people sick in 30 days, which is exactly what we saw the BBC reported with the super spreader in India. With 50% less exposure, 15 people get sick from one sick person in 30 days. With 75% less, 2.5 people get sick in 30 days. And with a 30-day lockdown, this issue could potentially be gone forever. But martial law in the United States is extremely rare. In fact, the last time we had country-wide martial law was when Abraham Lincoln instituted it. Martial law also makes us think of events like the Boston Tea Party, where we were mandated to house foreign military soldiers in our house, which is now totally not only against the American spirit, but against the liberty Americans fought for. But maybe martial law is just a bad word that evokes the wrong memories. Because sometimes when we hear martial law, we think we won't have rights to press anymore. We won't have rights to live freely within our homes or express ourselves. Yeah, we can't go inside, but martial law oftentimes evokes these images of complete military takeover. So maybe the better way to phrase martial law would be mandatory lockdown. You go outside, you get a traffic ticket. The problem though is we still have to pay our bills, we still have to pay our mortgages and our rents, and while it's nice that we're getting unemployment for Uber drivers and independent contractors and small businesses are getting free money and stimulus checks are coming out, a lot of Americans don't necessarily believe that this is A, enough action, or B, functional enough, because it's going to take weeks for people to get their stimulus checks, and you know what? We've got bills due today. But how would martial law affect our economy? Well, our economy would essentially freeze. And even if the government paid all of our bills or froze all of our bills for the 30-day entire lockdown, we would end up completely reconditioning society. Not only in 9 months would we probably have a massive corona baby boom, but we'd also probably have a substantial amount of corona divorces. We would see people no longer interested in buying Starbucks because they're used to making coffee at home, and we would have a completely different grocery store culture as people are now so accustomed to having their groceries delivered, they won't be going to stores anymore. More and more employees might also now be used to working from home and might actually prefer the efficiency of being able to work from home, possibly affecting pollution worldwide in a positive way. But what would this mean for real estate? What would this mean for the stock market? Well, if the country gets locked down, best case scenario might be that the stock market and real estate market also get shut down. So that way they only reopen when the outbreak is over, in which case markets might actually stay resilient. However, the last time the stock market was shut down for an extended period of time was in 1914. So perhaps the question we have to ask ourselves as a country is, are we okay with a 14 to 30 day mandatory lockdown if all of our bills are either frozen or put on hold, or otherwise we have some sort of debt holiday where we can all stay inside and we can get through this together? But then again, it begs the question, are we causing more harm than good? Is the economic harm of shutting down the country worse than the deaths that are occurring from this issue? Obviously, that is a very deep moral debate, and I'm excited to hear your input. Thanks so much for watching. Follow me on Instagram, and until next time.